Busy show as always. We're going to be joined by the Rodriguez brothers, Roby John and Rusty Jake Rodriguez, going to be joining us a little bit later on. And that's where we're going to start this week's show as well, because they're going to be involved in the Challenge Tour, the European Challenge Tour this weekend in Germany. The Challenge Tour back for the first time this year, for the first time taking place outside of England. Who do you see as the leading contenders this weekend in Niedenhausen?
Now, of course, we don't know for sure who's participating because Challenge Tour, they don't announce the entries ahead of time, although we know who's eligible. Those would be the people who went to European Q School back in February but didn't win a tour card. So we can only guess who's going to be there. As you'll hear from later, both of the Rodriguez brothers will be there. Well, two of the Rodriguez brothers will be there. You have to start with those two as among the favorites, because if you look through the non-tour card holders so far this year in the Players' Championship events, well, they've played more than pretty much anyone else. And they also have the two highest averages of the players who will be competing or will likely to be competing in Germany this weekend. Rusty's 42nd among all tour card holders, and Roby is 45th, both averaging north of 93 this year. That's higher than one of the leading German, Gabriel Clemens, is only averaging 92.5 on the year. So you have to start with those two, since one, we know they're going to be playing, and two, they've done a good job at the higher level, at the Pro Tour level so far this year. There's no reason to think dropping down to the Challenge Tour for the weekend or for the few days, they're not going to just continue that form. Another person who was high on the averages, both at Q School and so far in the Players' Championship events, is the German Lukas Wenig, the fifth highest average of players who didn't win a tour card at Q School, averaging over 90. He's been averaging nearly as well as the Rodriguez brothers so far, granted in a much smaller sample of events playing in the Players' Championship events. We haven't seen as much of him, not just this year, but ever. We haven't we only saw him at the third Super Series, where he had a couple good wins over Darius Labanauskas and Matthew Edgar, played competitively against Michael Van Geuren before going out at Players' Championship Event 12. So he's shown that he can hold his own. We don't know as much about him, but everything from the form this year makes you think he's live to win one of these events, if not more. Beyond that, I want to see who's competing. We're playing guesswork here because that's all we can do. I'm hoping to see Richard Veenstra, who did all right at Q School, but we haven't seen much of him in the PDC before. But he's a former world number one in the BDO. I want to see how he gets on, assuming he shows up. But then there's, some other players, who recently have been starting to get back to form. Benito Van de Pas was playing well at the back end of last year after a couple years in the doldrums. Christian Kist, who's battled injuries, we've seen just a little bit of him this year in the Players' Championship events, and he's held his own. The best he's played since those injuries really took over him, got the better of him after he cracked the top 32 3-4 years ago. And he got a couple good wins that same Players' Championship weekend, Super Series 3 as well, and played fairly well. But we haven't seen much of him. If he's healthy now, he is a former world champion. But I want to see who's competing. I'm throwing some names out there, mostly players we've seen so far in Players' Championship events, but there's plenty we haven't seen because they haven't gotten into the fields yet, or they haven't been willing to travel. And now they'll have the opportunity without having to cross the channel, some of them without even having to leave their home country. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see what the entries are, but those are some names to look out for.
We are taking a stab in the dark, really, at some of these players, whether they are going to be travelling to Germany this weekend or later this week, or when you guys are listening to this on Friday, if they're going to be there to play the first of those events over the weekend. And should mention as well that these events, particularly the European Challenge Tour this weekend, they will be played in that bubble setup. So they've got to head up there on the Thursday and be tested as well. And that may rule out some of the players having to take extra time off work from their normal jobs and not be able to go. But like we say, we do know that the Rodriguez brothers, they will be there, they will be playing, and I've got to start like you did with them because they have really impressed this year without having those tour cards. They came pretty close to getting them at Q School, especially Rusty Jake, just missing out on goal differential, as we call it. Spoke to them both on the show, and it's going to be such a busy 7 days for them. They're playing the 6 Challenge Tour events. Then they're going to be staying in Germany for the 3 associate member European Tour qualifiers on the Monday. Then they're going to be heading to England for the final 3 days of the Super Series. So it's a lot of darts, 12 events they're going to be playing in over that 7-day stretch. And I guess the good thing as far as their chances in the Challenge Tour is that those events are the first ones. So you'd think that they are going to be the freshest for those events coming up first. Aside from that, though, you mentioned a few of the names that I was going to mention. I'll give a mention to, I just love saying his name, Mario van den Bogarde. Would be great to see him involved in the Challenge Tour, see how he gets on. Sebastian Bieletsky as well. He's really impressed this year when we've seen him. We've seen a little bit of him at the UK Open when he hit that 9-darter, got to the 4th round. He's a player that has got a lot of potential and still very young. So we don't know if he's going to play this weekend, but if he does, he's going to be one to watch out for. Another player that we've seen who won the last Challenge Tour event, the last one of 2020, Kevin Dutz, who we spoke about players being unlucky at Q School. He finished 6th out of all the players on the averages for Q School across the UK and Europe. 92.42 his average, so he had a higher average than a lot of the players that ended up getting tour cards, but he missed out in the end. But he's a player that's shown glimpses on the Pro Tour this year as well with what he's capable of, and as I say, he's a former winner of these events as well. So there's some players to mention. There's a lot of quality, I think, in the field, potentially in the field, but there's some of the names that I'm going to be looking out for.